Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Code Show. My name is Mike Zornick. Today, we're going to start a brand new series of videos where I walk you through building a moderately sized iOS application. And the basic idea is that for people who are starting out iOS development or who maybe are actively developing but are looking for kind of some suggestions or improvements, tips and tricks, can kind of see how an app kind of starts out and evolves and grows, and different kind of ways you can handle different problems. And for me personally, it'll be kind of a fun way to teach. So I myself, short introduction for those of you who don't know me. I am a longtime Apple developer, first doing Macintosh stuff and then later iPhone stuff. I've done web development as well on the side for various years. But along with my development, I've also done teaching. So I've taught workshops at different companies, doing introductions to iOS. I taught as an adjunct professor back in the day, doing modern web design, which back then was like XHTML and CSS. But I really enjoy teaching and trying to find kind of a way to express that. And I thought this would be kind of a fun thing to do. So without further ado, talk a little bit about the app we're going to build. So I gave this a lot of thought, and historically I've built things like weather applications or to-do lists. Could do that again, but don't want to kind of retread old ground. And so I thought of something that I haven't built recently, and that is a conference app. So a lot of you may have gone to various conferences over the years, and some of them provide these, applications which have the schedule and the list of speakers and the sessions and where they're going to be, and any kind of like other helpful reference materials like maps and maybe photos and things of that type. And I thought it would be a good app to build because it's simple, so we can kind of start small and build something that's actually providing user value, and then kind of grow it over time. I also too have kind of some experience in this, in that I was part of a startup at one point that was building kind of a platform that does this type of stuff, kind of on like a white label perspective. But yeah, so we're gonna build this app, and the code's gonna be open source, so anybody can go check it out. And I welcome your feedback and your questions. And hopefully over time, this screencast can be more of a interaction between the people watching it and me, building the application. And we can kind of answer questions and stuff. But for now, we're going to start off simple and just get going. So with all of that said, how do you start an application? So if you're consulting or something, you're probably going to sit down with a client and you're going to talk about what they want, and they're going to give you this huge story with lots of ideas. And I think your challenge in the beginning is to really try to simplify them into the simplest thing of value that you can build, and then get that working and then iterate on it. I think one of the problems that happens in consulting is people sit down with a client, they come up with this grand vision of the application. They will sometimes actually use tools like Sketch and Balsamic to actually wireframe the entire thing, and then they'll just start building out smaller and smaller components of it. And then maybe they're 50% through the build, and they come to the conclusion that they've run out of money. And so they're left with basically some really nice wireframes and kind of a half-built app. And so what I try to do when possible, and this isn't always possible, but is just kind of work with the person, come up with something simple, and then try to iterate on top of it. And so that's how we're going to kind of go through this today. So even though I could sit here and brainstorm with you, and I've already done this, and there's nothing wrong with brainstorming and doing this on paper, but coming up with like a list of like ideas and things of that nature, when it comes down to actually working, I think it's better to keep things simple. So to get us started, we're going to build a wireframe with a tool called Balsamic. And the basic idea here is that whenever I'm building an application, I really try to separate even if it's just me, I really try to separate the design time from the development time. So that way, when I'm thinking about the user experience and I'm building that all out, all I'm working with is either like a really simple wireframing tool like Balsamiq or Sketch, if you like to work a little bit more like high fidelity, but even simple as pencil and paper. And then, kind of work out how you want things to work and how you want the app to flow. And then when you've kind of figured all that out, then you go to your developer, you put your developer hat on, and start actually building out the application. And the thing I like about that is because when you're doing that, the developer in you just has to build the acceptance criteria that your designer head has already figured out. And you don't have this problem of, just staring at a blank storyboard canvas and trying to figure out, what should go where. Like it's already done, and so you can kind of just really focus in on the code at hand. So, with that said, I'm going to start off with a new Balsamiq project. So let's see, creating a project here. Now, Balsamiq is it's pretty simple. We'll show you how it works a little bit here. Basically, we've got our main canvas in the center. There's on the left-hand side, you got this place for mockup, so you can actually create kind of like multiple screens inside of like a Balsamiq project file. Up top, you've got your kind of like toolbar where you can kind of drag in different kind of assets, and so they give you some stuff to kind of help out with iPhone development. Not a lot. You don't really need a lot. It's pretty easy to kind of create them yourselves. Although if you're really interested, there are lots of other like third-party templates and stuff that you can grab online. So I'm going to just drag that on there. I'm just going to hit save, and I'm just going to save this to my desktop, and we'll call it a conference app. Just to get us started, Balsamiq has this thing where it actually closes the document, reopens it, which is why I wanted to save it sooner than later. So we're going to design something. So how's this going to work? One of the things I like to do is, so Balsamiq has this little like kind of like the little yellow note card. And what I like to do is kind of just sit down and think in my head. It was like, okay, so what am I building? Why am I building it? What problems am I solving? And so you want to kind of define the context or the story that's going to happen here. So, so this is going to be a conference app, and the user is a conference attendee. And the problem we're solving is basically we're going to try to help the user figure out like what sessions to go to and where they are. So, user is, finishing lunch and needs to decide what session to attend next. So we'll take the idea that this is a multi-track conference, and so he or she has a choice of where they actually want to go. And so you think of like, okay, I'm a user, I bring my phone in my pocket, like what information do I need to know to make this decision? And so it's definitely helpful to know the events, or I'll call them events for now, events that are happening next. So there's this component of like grouping the events in kind of a time flow. Then you need to know kind of like the event title, which is really helpful. You want to know the event room, so where it's actually going to be, and potentially want to know the event speaker. And that's because like a lot of times when you're choosing an event at a conference, you might like, you don't even really care what they're talking about. It's like you see that Joe is talking at 2. You're like, I know Joe. I really want to see his talk. He's really, he's done really good talks in the past. And so sometimes that can even like overlap, the actual title that's actually going to happen. So, and to be a little bit of a nudge here, I'll say speakers instead of speaker. So maybe sometime you have an event that actually have multiple speakers that are performing it. So we'll keep it plural. That's a little bit of a scope creep that I would probably avoid, but I don't know. We'll deal with it for now. So one other edge case that I thought of in addition to the kind of multiple speakers, which I'll list, and I'm going to change this. So I'm going to say these are the edge cases, and we'll say multiple speakers, and we'll say sessions, events spanning multiple time slots. And so the idea here is that you're going through your kind of use case, you're going to try to solve the basic case, and if you come to mind of an edge case that's going to be a problem, document it, and then think about it as you're kind of doing your design, but don't let it be a defining factor of like how you design things. Particularly when you're kind of in a consulting arrangement where you would actually want to discuss these things with the client before you realize, because the client may actually listen to an edge case and be like, I don't care about that edge case, that never happens for us, and you don't really have to worry about it. Cool. So with that said, let us start our design. So we're going to so this is just going to be a one screen app for the initial kind of version 1. And normally what I like to do with kind of this thing is I can imagine we're going to be seeing like a table view. Now, Balsamiq does have a thing called an iOS menu, which you could potentially use for something like this, where it's got its own little syntax that lets you kind of visualize what a table would look like. We're going to do it something a little bit simpler, so we're just going to take some text and basically these rules. So they've got horizontal rules and vertical rules, and we're just going to kind of fake it and kind of do our own cell designs. So for us, as I said, we need kind of like the title, and I want to make this a little bit bigger. I find that Balsamiq size is actually a little bit smaller than I like, and I would much rather the wireframe actually have larger copy than smaller copy, because it's a lot easier to kind of go down. If you pack a lot of small copy into the design, it's a lot harder to kind of find space as you kind of realize that you need it later on. Next thing I'll do is I'll just lock this background so I'm not selecting it when I kind of tap down there. But we need the title. We need the room name, capitalized name. And then we need the speaker names. I'll say names just for now. Now, when designing our cell, so in iOS, typically you have these rules, and then like the cell doesn't go all the way to the edge. It kind of just goes mostly to the edge, so you get this little white space there. As far as the arrangement goes, there's a couple ways you could do this, obviously. One, I think, that's interesting is to have the title and actually have the title span the full availability of the row. And that just kind of comes from experience, knowing that people tend to do and this is something that I wouldn't recommend, but they tend to build these very long session titles. And so that's something where I feel like if we had a title that was particularly long, we would want it to stretch. So we'll give it kind of that full space, and then we'll put the speaker name underneath there and the room name there. And for a little bit of difference, like you might actually want the title just to be a hair bigger, and maybe even give it a little bit of like a bold color or something to kind of help stand out. And the room name, we'll stand that out a little bit by giving it kind of this bluish color. So like the room name, while it needs to be there because that's going to be like the results of the user, like where they actually go, it's not the thing that actually, they're not going to go to Ballroom A because they really like Ballroom A, unless, I don't know, maybe they like the plugs there or something. So this will be the kind of design of our cell, and to give kind of like what this looks like. Actually, here, let me I only want to select those because I don't want to repeat the cell there. So this is what some of the cells look like. Now, what might be nice to do for in our designer head is actually to provide an example where the title is really long. So we'll say a really long title that might span multiple lines, and this should work. And so we'll see, like right there, it doesn't kind of show up. And so let's make some changes. In balsamic auto size, I don't think you can do that actually, unfortunately. So okay, let me grab some other text. So instead of simple text, this should actually span multiple lines. So let's just change this out here. And this was, what was this? 18 bold. So we'll do 18 bold. And I'll get rid of that. And I'll put this up here. And I'll make that span there. And cool. So now we've got kind of a demo of, you know, showing the developer there, like, you know, how this should actually work. So this is our table view. Now, in addition to just, instead of having the app just launch with a table view, I do like to kind of wrap this in a navigation controller. So we're going to have kind of a navigation bar at the top. And to do that, I'll just ask for a rectangle. And I'm going to get rid of the border. And I want to give it a background color. If I were just designing this straight up, I'd probably just use black. And then, you know, figure it out. One of the things that so if we're building a conference application, rather than just use black, I feel like it'd be nice to have a little bit of a branding thing here. So if the conference colors were, you know, say orange, you know, the fact that the application would launch and it would have this kind of orange feel to it, I think would be appropriate. So, so I'm actually going to give it an orange background. And for the text, I'll just grab the subtitle here. And let's say the conference name was presented inside of the navigation bar. So we will make this text the full span and we'll center it. And we'll actually change the text to be white so it stands out a little bit. And I think this is a little bit tall for... So that's a little bit better. The one thing we are missing at this point is the times. So we're not kind of listing the times. And so my thought here is that we would show a table view and we'll group the sessions by time. So we have a collection of these happening at 12 and or maybe 1 o'clock, and then we have a collection of them happening at 2 o'clock. And so to do that, we'll just, you know, in code, we'll build a table view that has sections in it. Visually here, that will look something like this. So we'll take another rectangle. And again, I'll get rid of the border. I'll give it a background color of like gray. And the section breaks will look something like this. So I'll just do speaker name. And we'll make that span the full width. I'll make it white. And then we'll say, I don't know, like Tuesday, 1 p.m. And that'll be kind of group. Actually, let's make it say 1:00 p.m. That'll be one group, and then you can do another. And then this will say 2 p.m. So imagine these are hour sessions. So I'll move the first one up, and, well, here, I'll do this. I'll group them. Then I'll move them up. So that'll be there. And then just kind of tweak our cells here. So, yeah, looking back at our kind of context and our acceptance criteria, User's a conference attendee. They're finishing lunch. They need to decide what session to attend. This is a fair first draft. Obviously, we could probably brainstorm ideas. The idea of tapping a specific event and being able to view more about that event, including like a larger description. But that can come later. Like let's build this. Let's show it to the user and get the feedback, and then work from there. So in our next series, next video, we'll jump into Xcode and we'll build a project and we'll get started on the code. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.